Okay, I want you to imagine something for a second. You're a surgical resident, and the skills you're learning today, they could literally save a life tomorrow. Forgetting a key step isn't just about a bad grade. It could be a tragedy. So how do you make absolutely sure that life-saving knowledge actually sticks?
For these future doctors, this isn't some abstract exercise. It's about mastering a skill that can mean the difference between life and death. And it brings up a really fascinating question for all of us. Is there a scientifically better way to learn?
Well, a 2006 study decided to put this to the test. Researchers took a group of surgical residents and split them in two. Both groups got the exact same training materials for a really complex procedure. But Group 2 was told to make one single tiny change to how they studied.
A month later, they were tested. And the results? They were absolutely staggering. The second group performed their surgeries significantly better. So what was their secret? Well, the answer isn't some gimmick. It's actually hidden in a deeper understanding of how our brains are wired to learn. So let's start right there.
Think of your brain like a super complex filing system. To figure out the secret of our surgical residents, we first have to understand how that system actually works. It all comes down to how a memory is formed in the first place. Let's say you're learning, the anatomy of the heart. The very first time you see that diagram, the new info is temporarily saved in a part of your brain called the hippocampus, but it's fragile, it's temporary. As you review it though, you're firing those same brain cells over and over, and that strengthens the connections. Eventually, this stable memory gets moved to the neocortex. That's where it becomes a permanent part of what you know. But here's the part that blew my mind. This whole critical transfer process, it doesn't happen while you're staring at your textbook. It happens in the downtime, in between study sessions, and especially when you're asleep. Your brain does its most important work when you're technically offline.
Okay, so if our brains are doing all this heavy lifting in the background, how can we, help them along? Well, it turns out there are 3 powerful techniques designed to work with your brain's natural filing system. And these are the keys to unlocking the resident's secret.
All right, technique number 1 is testing. And hey, forget about grades for a minute. I want you to think of testing as a workout for your memory. Every time you use a flashcard or try a practice quiz, you're forcing your brain to actively go in and pull that information out of storage. That active retrieval is like a rep at the gym. It's what makes the memory pathway stronger and easier to access the next time.
And this shows us the huge difference between active and passive learning. Just rereading your notes feels super productive, right? But it can trick you. It creates this false sense of competence, because, of course, you know it when the answer is sitting right there in front of you. Active testing is a reality check. It forces you to confront what you truly remember, not just what looks familiar. But wait, what if you get the answer wrong? Believe it or not, that's actually a good thing. The very act of struggling for an answer, of racking your brain, it activates all the related concepts you have stored. So when you finally see the correct answer, your brain is perfectly primed to just slot it into that web of knowledge. It creates a much stronger connection.
Our second technique actually builds on this whole idea of retrieval. It's called interleaving, and it kind of challenges the way most of us were taught to study. Interleaving is all about mixing things up within a single study session.
See, most of us use a method called blocking. You do 50 math problems, then you move on to history. Interleaving is the exact opposite. You might do 10 math problems, then switch to a history chapter, then come back for 10 more math problems. It feels less efficient, I know, but the results say something totally different. So why on earth does this work? Well, for one, it forces that same powerful retrieval process we just talked about. But it also does something else really cool. It trains your brain to recognize which strategy to apply to a problem instead of just mindlessly repeating the same one. It helps you see the bigger picture, the connections between different ideas.
And that brings us to our final technique, which might be the most powerful of them all. It's all about timing. It's called spacing, and it is the mortal enemy of cramming. It's all about spreading your study sessions out over time.
Come on, we've all done it. The all-nighter before a big test. And sure, it might get you through the exam, but a week later, that information is just gone. Why? Because you've skipped the most crucial step. Spacing your learning gives your brain that essential offline time, especially sleep, to move that knowledge from fragile short-term memory into the permanent long-term storage of the neocortex.
So, there we have it, our 3 keys: testing, interleaving, and spacing. Now, let's go all the way back to where we started, to our 2 groups of surgical residents, and that one small change that made all the difference. So,
What was it? What was their secret? What was that single instruction given to the high-performing group that led to such a massive improvement a month down the line? Was it more flashcards? A different way of mixing up topics?
It was spacing. That's it. Both groups studied for the exact same total amount of time. But the lower-performing group crammed all their training into a single day. The more successful group, their training was spread out over 4 weeks. That gave their brains the time they needed to properly consolidate that life-saving knowledge.
And really, that's the whole point here. Testing, interleaving, and spacing. These aren't just clever study hacks. They work because they are designed with the brain in mind. They take advantage of the natural, incredibly powerful processes our brains already use to learn and remember things.
Ultimately, these techniques are about so much more than just passing a test or learning a surgical procedure. They're about working with our brains instead of against them. So the real question isn't just what the residents did, it's how will you use these keys to unlock your own learning potential in everything you do.